Today we're exploring, can AI make us better humans?
In my first year of working, I gave 50% of every paycheck I made to charity, and that was meant to be a bit of a statement that here I am, a first-year doctor, the worst paid doctor, but even that puts me in the top 1 or 2% of income earners in the world. If that's not enough to live comfortably on, what are we doing?
How do you think we can weigh up whether AI is overall good or bad?
Some of the nonprofits that we fund, like Give Directly, are using AI to help identify the areas that are most in need.
I've always thought that technology is just an accelerator of what is already out there.
At what point do you think we can trust AI to be a better lawyer than humans? Already?
If you were to ask me the same question about doctors, certainly LLMs are better than me at medicine in probably most respects.
Would you trust an algorithm more than your own empathy when it comes to deciding where to donate your money?
That's a good question, I guess.
Hi and welcome to More Than Good by Effective Altruism Australia. Today we're exploring, can AI make us better humans? And I'm joined by some fantastic guests. With me today is Noel Lim, who's the CEO and co-founder of Anika Legal, and Henry Howard, who is an incredible doctor, and Grace Adams, who's the CEO of Effective Altruism Australia. Welcome everyone.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks. So first, with yourself, Henry, you're a doctor who donates 10% of his income to charitable causes. Can you please explain, why do you do that? Why 10%?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I think the answer is probably a profound sense of gratitude to the world. I feel very fortunate I basically feel like I've won the birth lottery.
Yeah.
I was born in Australia. I was born to wonderful parents who are very smart, very kind, very loving. I've had great friends. I've had great opportunities. So I just feel like I've really lucked out. And, what do you do when you win the lottery? You give a bit to people who haven't been as lucky as you, I think. That's why I donate. I feel that it's the right thing to do. I feel it's right to give back. Why 10%? It's a good question. 10% is a pretty arbitrary number. There's a long history of people giving 10% of their money. I actually sort of give somewhere between 10 and 20, depending on how I'm feeling. In my first year of working, I gave 50%. I did a sort of little campaign where I donated half of every paycheck I made to charity. And that was meant to be a bit of a statement that, look, here I am, a first-year doctor, the worst paid doctor in the country, but even that puts me in the top 1 or 2% of income earners in the world. If that's not enough to live comfortably on, what are we doing? So I thought I'd make a statement, I'd give half of that income, and I'd hope that maybe other doctors seeing that would think, well, if this guy can do it, maybe I can do a little bit of that as well. I pulled back to 10%. Why? It's a good question. Why should I not be still giving 50% or maybe 80% or 100% and I can live in a cardboard box in the gutter? It's a hard decision to make, and I'm not entirely sure, where the right number is on that. I suppose the ultimate answer is you don't want to be too weird. And I have people around me that love me. I have people around me that I love, that I want to maintain relationships with. And if I lived in a van in a car park, some of those relationships might be impaired. So I find a middle ground that is, not too weird, but, is maybe pushing the boundaries of what is considered normal in favour of, trying to do good in the world.
Did you inspire any other doctors to join you after that first year?
Look, no one started giving 50% of their money away.
Okay, that's fair enough.
I have to tell you. I have heard over the years of different people coming to me and saying, I've had people say that it has inspired them to donate 10% of their money to charity. I've had a few people sort of join the 10% giving pledge from Giving What We Can. And I've had other people make sort of more vague allusions to it, forcing them to think a little bit more about, their place in the world and how they think about money and what they do with it. I don't have the concrete numbers.
Okay.
I tell them that's not good enough. I need concrete numbers. I mean, any impact you can have on people is beautiful. And a lot of it's immeasurable and vague. And my whole thing is just I want to normalise the idea of giving. I think it should be seen as normal. I gave 50% of my money away and people told me it was crazy. I want to live in a world where that's actually not that crazy. And I don't think it should be.
I have a question for everyone. Would you trust an algorithm more than your own empathy when it comes to deciding where to donate your money?
That's a good question. I guess to me it means I'm thinking through what it means for an algorithm to be the one to decide. I guess I don't trust my own empathy when it comes to giving. I don't think that my empathy is necessarily a reliable indicator of impact, because the things that I feel the most empathy towards, my friends and my family, aren't necessarily the people that need the most help. So maybe I would rely on an algorithm that is more impartial, can see where the real needs are, and can help me allocate my resources better. Because, yeah, I don't really think that my empathy is a great guide for impact.
Yeah.
Yeah, is that your empathy without reference to any of Effective Altruism's resources? Because if so, then yeah, I definitely trust the algorithm. I think that's exactly where I'd be coming from.
Yeah.
So the stuff around you is going to be what's going to pull on my heartstrings.
Exactly.
I did actually look up on the different AIs. I wondered what they would tell me if I asked them about impact and effective giving and things. So I asked each of them, ChatGPT and Claude and even Grok, like if I want to donate money, but I don't know where to give it. Like I want to have positive impact in the world. I want to do the most good. No matter which varied way I framed the question, each of them independently recommended Against Malaria Foundation, give the mosquito nets, look up GiveWell, look up Effective Altruism. Yeah, they each did. Yeah. In that sense, if I did trust the algorithm, I think it would be giving a similar answer to where I'm currently at.
Yeah. So, Noel, at what point do you think we can trust AI to be a better lawyer than humans? Already?
Look, I think that's a really difficult question because it depends, like there are many different lawyers in many different situations, and often it just comes down to like the incentives, right? Like if you are, I think something that's played out quite a bit in the private legal sector versus the not-for-profit legal sector, often referred to as like the community legal sector, is you see a lot of innovation and use of AI in the private sector because what happens if you innovate there, you might make more money. And so there's like a personal interest for like the specific person that maybe it warrants taking more of a risk. Whereas in the not-for-profit sector, that doesn't necessarily happen where, you being more efficient might mean you serve more people, but your paycheck's going to stay the same, these other things. Yeah. And so in that sense, it will depend on the individual and, how they are as a lawyer, full stop. How they are able to act with AI and to what extent they choose it. So bit of a non-answer where I don't think you can answer that. There are a lot of things to consider. And I think when you consider those things, there are probably even bigger implications on than AI on, how should we think about lawyers and how they provide justice to people.
Henry, do you think that doctors get anything wrong about saving lives?
No doctor's ever made a mistake in the history of, of course. And if you were to ask me the same question you just asked Noel, what about doctors? I'd say certainly that LLMs are better than me at medicine in probably most respects. So I think it is a little bit scary as a doctor to be looking down the barrel of the future, seeing what's coming. It's very hard to integrate all of the information that's out there for any particular topic in medicine. And even a specialist, a hyper-specialised, paediatric cardiologist or something, has to spend a lot of time just keeping up to date with the latest information that's coming out. So I think, considering how hard it is to stay up to date, you can see why doctors would sometimes get it wrong. It'd be very hard to get it right every time.
Yeah.
Of course, there's always going to be things, well, for a long time at least, I think there'll be things that AI will not quite be able to do as good as a human doctor, and those are the things that are going to keep us employed, at least for the future.
Grace, how do you think we should how do you think we can weigh up whether AI is overall good or bad?
Yeah, I think this is an incredibly complex question about whether AI is overall good or bad and how we would find out. I mean, realistically, I think, hindsight will be 20/20. We'll find out over time. I think that there is enormous potential for AI to really change things for the better. I'm really excited about, some of the ways that some of the nonprofits that we fund, like Give Directly, are using AI to help identify the areas and villages that are most in need of these direct cash transfers to then be able to help people, graduate out of extreme poverty. I think there are incredible uses in medicine, in all of these areas where we're going to see a lot of innovation, and that's great. But I think that there is also enormous potential for harm. So I am, very, very concerned about the risks of governments misusing these systems, whether this is in war or in other ways, in mass surveillance of their constituents, but also the risk of these systems coming out of control. There's many scenarios that, sound kind of like sci-fi doom scenarios that I think are still unlikely, but sadly plausible. And whether these things happen, I think really depends on the actions that we take now as a society to decide how we should utilize technologies and who gets to be in power. So, I think it's an interesting question. I think maybe fundamentally all technologies have the possibility of being used for good or for evil. Yes. And it's up to us as individuals to decide how that happens. But I'd be interested if you guys have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, I often think about steam engines or rockets. Rockets took us to the moon and they gave us the GPS satellites and let us communicate around the world, but they also gave us intercontinental ballistic missiles. Yeah. Steam engines produced the Industrial Revolution, but also made tanks and warplanes and things. AI is going to potentially have an enormous impact, I would hope, on positive effects on economic growth all around the world. But inevitably, someone will imitate my voice and call my parents and ask for money eventually. People will be scammers and there will be autonomous suicide drones flying around, in war zones. And it's scary. There's good and bad that's going to come of it.
Yeah, I do think that, I've always thought that technology, including AI, is just an accelerator, right? It just gives you, it gives you more force behind whatever already exists. Yeah. And I think, so, AI is perhaps like a more powerful form of technology that we've seen. I think that just means that it will more powerfully accelerate what is already out there. And so when I thought about this first, it was I landed somewhere pretty bleak, which was that, well, if we look at all the social causes and the forces against it, who are the ones with more resources who are going to be better placed to accelerate what their interests are with AI? And so I would guess in that case, it's probably people who don't have social, the social value behind their interests, and they're looking for perhaps profit. Yeah. That said, and so I should say that this is something that that I see quite a bit, where when you work in access to justice and law, you see often you have these financial interests and then legal rights are the counterbalance to that, to make sure that you can still have a functioning society where the financial interests have this market structural advantage. And so you see that in whether it's housing or employment, there's always someone who has more of a financial interest, and then if they're going to be better placed to use technology, then they might be stronger. Yeah. I think the part that I find hopeful, and maybe I'm optimistic on this, is that how I explain that is in this paradigm of, it's what are the interests for and against, But I think there's a much greater interest behind the social causes that are just not being like totally leveraged right now. And that's because it's perhaps just a little too difficult to leverage that. It's not worth the resources. Like a really simple example is that there are many tens of thousands of law students who want to provide free legal services. We generally don't do that because law students just take a lot of resources to supervise. It's kind of easier to just let the lawyers do it. However, Anika built some really quite basic technology that allowed law students to be better harnessed, really, and it triples the output of our lawyers. And so we're saying, okay, now we've got all of these untapped resources that we're bringing in through technology. When it comes to social causes in general, now you've got, you think about a cause like housing, and you've got the people who are working in the housing sector. You've got people who are, the sort of like sign up to the housing union, things like that. But then there's the vast majority of people aren't those people. But could AI help us leverage their interest and their energy so that we can, further the interests of, for everyone to stay in a safe home and, have that kind of quality of life? I think so, and I really hope so. And I think then you're looking at a much greater pool of resources, energy. So yeah, I think that's the thing that really gives me hope when it comes to these emerging tech.
And how do you think impact-led organisations can use AI to improve their outcomes?
Individual, not for specific, not for impact.
Yeah.
Organisations. There's so many ways. I think there is truly an infinite number of ways. Maybe just to give you my take on where would be the best value for AI, where you're going to get the most social value out of using AI as an impact organisation. I think I think that where the long-term sustainable change comes from is that deep systems change. And this is looking at it through a systems thinking lens, where often what we're looking at is what's happening, in the headlines or, what are some of the patterns. But I guess there's a lot of people who believe that where you get the real change over time is when you shift the systemic conditions, which are the mental models. So what are the beliefs, the assumptions, the values that people have? And so as an example, that might be that we might have the belief that we should be providing people with legal support when they're in a crisis situation rather than intervening earlier and perhaps, requiring less resources to do so. That's an example. And then there's also a structural level where I think is really important. So it's what are the policies? What are the practices? Do we not fund duplication of not-for-profit organisations? Why are we doing that? What are the repercussions? All of that structural stuff. And so I think this is where you get really high leverage on your efforts to improve the system for good. But it's not well resourced, I think. Could we use AI to start to try and shift those mental models and those structural things? I don't have a clear idea of exactly how to do it, but that's absolutely where I would focus my efforts to create an outsized impact with AI.
And a question for everyone, do you think that the next few years is really going to shape the future of the planet?
It feels like quite a loaded question. It's hard to say no. It's hard to think of a period of years, actually, that you could say no to, I suppose, in history. It does feel it's a very exciting time.
Yeah, my sense is that this is, potentially an incredibly impactful kind of, 5 years, decade. We'll see how fast kind of things change in the coming years. But that's why I feel particularly excited about trying to, I guess, influence people's beliefs to be, more positive and to have people more engaged in kind of building a better world for all of us. This does feel like such an important time to really try to shape people's beliefs about, how positive the world could be and the progress that we can make, because I think we are seeing more and more technologies that are being developed that, you know, we have the ability to influence for good. And if we don't take the opportunity to influence these things for good, I think in the absence of that, you know, there are other incentives at play and they might not be quite as positive. So this feels like an important time for people to think about how to live a good life, a life that helps others to do good as well, and to take action on it.
I think a lot about the weavers that, you know, were put out of work by the mechanical loom, you know, a mere 150 years ago or whenever. And the mechanical loom came in and it made cloth and fabric, 100 times cheaper and more accessible for everyone, and that's a miracle. But the weavers lost all their jobs and they went around smashing up the looms. And we're going to need some sort of plan for the, you know, the chaos that's going to come out of potential job displacements and things like that. And I don't quite know what that looks like, but I think it's good to get people thinking about what are our plans going to be? How are we going to have empathy for people that are going to struggle, and what are we going to do to help them, including me if I lose my job as a doctor? You know, I mean, we're all at risk. We're all potentially going to be disrupted.
Absolutely. And it's happening at such an exponential rate as well that I'm not sure we'll be able to keep up with the rate at which things are moving. So who knows? The question for everyone, do you think that something can be legal but deeply unethical?
Yes, absolutely.
Such as?
I think there are.
Where to start?
Yeah.
Rapid fire. We'll go in a circle. We'll name them all.
I think like
three hands.
Maybe like. Okay, so like the answer is a strong yes, having seen many laws which just do not provide any sort of, you know, real justice. You know, like real justice being you have your rights upheld, but you also maintain your dignity in the process. That's how I think about justice. Yeah. I would say that many, you know, things that are legal, particularly in an environment where, you know, the broader legal justice system, where only 1 in 5 legal problems actually have access to justice. Right? So you've got 4 out of 5. In 4 out of 5 cases, you're locked out of the justice system.
Wow.
And so I think there's a broader thing here where it's like we are living in we're living in one of the most developed countries in the world, one of the luckiest countries in the world, and still the vast majority of people are locked out of the justice system. But then even going to try and get to like, well, could it be just if we're just looking at it on paper, like the intention of laws are not always captured in how they are written, how they're applied. So, I think there's it's kind of why I have a job, hey, because there are both laws that exist and need to be enforced, but also some laws need to be changed, and until we have that, we won't have justice, and until then, one of the really core pillars of the social contract is being completely violated for the majority of people in a country like Australia. Yeah.
What do you guys think?
I was just trying to think of all the examples of, you know, things that were legal but clearly bad.
Yeah, so
slavery is a big one that comes to mind. Women not being allowed to vote, I suppose, comes to mind. Some of the things we do to animals, I think, are pretty quick. I don't think they'll be looking back on that very fondly in 100 years. Yeah. Those come to mind immediately as things that were legal as anything.
Yeah.
So what is legal and what is normal is a rough measure, you know. Yeah. You'll probably, if you use that as your moral guide, maybe you'll be right like 90% of the time. But that 10% is, you know, you need to put in some thought to make sure you're not doing evil things that are just normalised because they're sticky and hard to change.
And I guess it's very subjective as well, depending on where you are in the world, you know.
That's absolutely right.
So many things are, terrible things in Australia are illegal, like what you discussed with what we do to animals, but internationally there's so many things that are legal that are deeply terrible. And, you know, you have to exercise your own critical thinking at some point, because you can't just rely on, if it's legal, it's fine.
which is very hard work. It's exhausting trying to figure out what is right and wrong.
Yeah.
And I think that's why we often fall back to just what's normal.
Yeah.
What everyone else around us is doing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's just there's key things that I think we're missing there.
Yeah.
And that's what people have done since the beginning of time. And clearly they were, looking back in retrospect, there was clearly some things that people were getting wrong just by following the norms of the time.
Yeah, and I often think about, you know, if that's the case, that, you know, so many things were legal in the past that we now think are, you know, were incredibly wrong. You know, we almost must be making those same mistakes now, and it feels like there is so much further to go for moral progress. And in some cases, we've even seen, you know, legal protections wound back on important issues. You know, so I think, you know, women's reproductive rights is a really good example of something that is becoming a more live issue in a number of countries. And, you know, obviously there's been some pretty significant repeals of laws in the US. But, you know, attempts to do the same here in Australia. And, yeah, so I think that what is legal is an ongoing discussion, right? And there's such need to really continue progress in that space. Yeah. Are you interested in using reason and evidence to do more good? Do you think at the intersection of philosophy and taking action in the world? Join hundreds of people interested in effective altruism for a weekend of learning, discussion and taking action at our 10th annual EAGX Australasia Conference in Melbourne from the 27th to the 29th of November. You can learn more and apply now at eaa.org.au/EAGX.
Noel, how has AI and tech allowed you to create more impact through your work at Anika Legal?
Yeah, so, well, do you mean AI or do you mean tech generally? Because I guess they're
Maybe you can answer both separately.
Yeah. I think, yeah, I'll start with the tech side of things. I gave that example before about how through, you know, I would say like a fairly basic use of technology, coupled with a lot of process design and just intention, we were able to build this service model which allows law students to like supercharge our lawyers, make sure that they could service 3 times as many people. And so that, you know, that required a few things, tech included. And for Anika, that's huge. But part of the vision is, okay, can we get every community legal centre using a service model like this? Can we, you know, in many cases, can we triple the output of a lawyer to provide free services, make sure that people have access to justice? So that's, I guess, like a really clear example of that. But then it has all of these other benefits, like we've got this service model now. It actually works really well for corporate lawyers who want to do pro bono but can't because of a schedule, but because it's tech enabled, you can do it flexibly and remotely. And now you're bringing all of these new people into the mix and leveraging all of these resources, which would have otherwise never gone to a social cause. So there's like this one, you know, fairly basic thing that we do with technology. And I think what happened here was we then started to say, oh, hey, everyone, we've built this like fantastic service model. You can massively increase the output of your legal practice, and started trying to give it away basically to other not-for-profit legal services. And the responses that we got were largely things like, oh, that's great, but I don't know how this would fit within our government-funded programs, which is like all of, you know, that's all our funding. So kind of doesn't seem feasible. In some cases, there was responses like, well, actually, this might actually work, but a lot of our staff believe that their work is very specialised and don't think that a generic model like this would work. You know, I think, you know, this wasn't mentioned, but I think this is definitely the case, that there are probably some pretty strong beliefs in the not-for-profit sector that if we, you know, do this, if we let tech do more, what does that mean for our jobs? Which I think is, you know, you can think that in the for-profit space, but like thinking that in the not-for-profit space, I think find really challenging. So there are a lot of these factors at play, which, you know, they're not technical problems to solve, right? They're adaptive. They're like people problems, but and that's what's constraining technology and its potential for, you know, providing more people with the basic legal rights. And so kind of like I use that to set up this answer of like, how has AI changed our impact? Like Anika specifically, it has. There are many, many things that I do with the assistance of Gen AI. You know, I'm doing a whole lot more now. But I think the bigger picture, the more interesting question is like, you know, if all of these barriers were already there, constraining the use of like pretty basic technology, they're going to be there for AI. They're going to be probably even stronger, given that you know what we're talking about with AI. And so I think, how is AI changing access to justice? Not enough, I think, and it's not because we need to, you know, solve technical problems better. We need to solve the adaptive problems better, to make sure that the beliefs and the structures in place really allow for us to like harness its potential and make sure that everyone can, just like be protected by their justice system, or like, you know, any of like have a safe home, all of these things. So yeah, I think increasingly I just think, are we like, this is not a technical problem, but I don't want to think about it like that, because that's, you know, that's really already, well, we've already hit the ceiling on that. Yeah.
Henry, what cognitive biases do you think distort philanthropic funding allocation?
So the big one that I've noticed is that people, and particularly doctors, tend to like to help locally rather than more broadly, and especially internationally. And I think there's a very good reason for that, which is that as soon as you're tackling a problem that you don't actually have any personal interaction with, you're sort of delving into the unknown, and you either need to do quite a bit of research and acquire a lot of information, or you need to have someone that you really trust that has done all that work and acquired that information. So doctors are very cognizant of the fact that if you go in trying to solve a problem that you don't really understand, you can do a lot of harm, as evidenced by the 𝗵𝗵𝗵𝗶𝗃 Instagram wellness influencers, you know, who they eat salads and they do a lot of exercise, which is good, but they also think sunscreen is a conspiracy and that vaccines will give you turbo cancer. So you can, you know...
Is sunscreen a conspiracy?
Well, I'm glad you asked the question. So if you look at the cancer rates around the world, like Australia is, you know, an absolute black spot. Like it's not, no pun intended, but it's the death rates are so atrocious. And I have some sympathy for people who think sunscreen is a conspiracy in places that are not Australia. But in Australia, I really don't think it's sort of viable, like, when our melanoma rates are as they are. Anyway, I think, so because of these, you know, these sort of characters that we see, you can see that people can have the best of intentions, but if they're trying to solve a problem that they don't really understand, they can, A, not get much done, or B, even worse, do harm. And so I think doctors are very hesitant to go diving into solving, you know, the economic problems of Madagascar or something when they have no idea, you know, what's going on over there at all, even if there could be enormous leverage because, you know, $1 that takes us a few minutes to earn over there could be like someone's hourly wage or something, you know? So there's an enormous leverage you can have, but there's this risk that, well, do I actually know what I'm doing? So that's why you have to find resources that you can trust. And then the whole framework of effective altruism is that there's these randomized controlled trials, which is basically the concept of evidence-based medicine but applied to global issues. So you run these trials, you see what actually works, you see what the outcomes are, you measure them, and then you figure out what works. And giving people mosquito nets really works very well. Giving people deworming medication works fairly well, but we also can't quite figure that out. But these RCTs tell you these answers, give you this really valuable information. And I think if doctors put in a little bit of effort, everyone as well, if people put in a little bit of effort, they can overcome this sort of barrier that is, well, I don't know what the situation is over there and I don't know what the answers are. It's just there's this barrier that people struggle to sort of pass over. I think GiveWell is an excellent resource. I think you can go, if you don't trust GiveWell because you've never heard of it, well, you can go directly to the randomized control trials yourself. And the economists that sort of popularised this idea of doing randomised controlled trials in global health and development, Esther Duflo and Abhijit Banerjee, they won the Nobel Prize, the Nobel Economics Memorial Prize in 2017 or something. And this is a fairly well-established sort of field that I think we should have a lot of trust in. It certainly gives me a lot of trust, having looked into it, gives me enough trust that I feel confident donating some of my money to these issues that are global and are giving me, doing possibly 100 or 1,000 times as much good with my money as if I donated to the local animal shelter, which is a good thing to do. But, a family losing a child to malaria, which kills 500,000 people every year, mostly children, is to me an absolute travesty. And I think not donating money to that is unfortunate.
If you were in a life-threatening situation, would you prefer an AI doctor or a human doctor?
Well, there's so many types of doctors. Would I prefer an AI doctor to me in a life-threatening situation? Possibly. Would I prefer an AI doctor? Depends on the emergency as well. Like, if you need to be cannulated, definitely get me. I'm pretty good at that.
Let's say both your legs have
both legs chopped off?
flown off.
Well, does the AI have hands? So, I mean, that's one of the main barriers with AI right now. Like, we don't have, you could put in the prompt to the AI, okay, both his legs have blown off, like, what do I do? Well, you're still going to need someone to put on the tourniquet and to rush you to theatre and tie off all the vessels and do what you need to do. If it was a medical emergency, like I've come into the ED with chest pain, what do I do? I potentially AI is better at that stuff than a junior doctor.
Yeah.
At the current time, I would much prefer to have my ED consultant in charge of, and my cardiologist in charge of the emergency like that. So I think it's really interesting, the tools that are coming out, the evidence engines that are, I think, one of the most used apps now by doctors in the United States is this evidence engine that basically you just put in a medical query, and it gives you an answer, but it's all sourced. So it's sourced off guidelines and literature.
Yeah.
That's a really interesting tool. It still, in edge cases, gets it wrong. So that's, of course, the problem. But, I mean, that's pretty interesting. And it can do this in a few seconds when it would take me days, weeks to review that amount of literature. So, it's not there yet, but it's catching up and it's getting more and more useful, which is really exciting because so many parts of the world, I mean, I rock up to the Royal Melbourne Hospital ED, there's doctors, and if I have an emergency, they'll see me, and that's great. I don't need AI there right now. But say you get sick in the middle of Burkina Faso, or, some fairly under-resourced place in the world, well, you can rock up to the hospital and maybe there's no doctor there. Or maybe there's a doctor there at my level who doesn't really know what they're doing. In that case, AI has the potential to bring access to healthcare to an enormous portion of the population. I mean, honestly, in that case, even if it's getting it wrong 1% of the time, well, if the alternative is having no access at all, that is potentially really good.
Yeah, I think that holds pretty similar to law, where, probably it's even easier with law in that you don't need someone to tie a tourniquet around. Like pretty much almost everything can be done. But yeah, it depends on, what's your alternative. If it's nothing, then sure, that's great. And also, I think your point on, where are we now versus like where the progress will be, even like a few months from now, it's going to be wildly different. And that's probably the biggest factor right now of like, do you choose an AI lawyer or not?
That's very interesting. I uploaded my blood test results to my ChatGPT just to ask it, hey, what supplementation should I have based on my results? And I really liked all its recommendations. So that's probably not a good idea to be doing that. I should probably see a real doctor.
Is it evidence-based, and is it resourcing the literature? Is it
from the right places? Yeah.
I mean, you don't really know. But then also if you go to a doctor, I suppose you're not 100% sure that they're on the money as well.
Yeah.
Maybe they trained 40 years ago and they haven't kept up to date with the literature, and the thing that was right in med school 40 years ago is not so right anymore.
Yeah, I guess it depends on the doctor and all of that. Grace, how do you feel that social media is shaping how and where people choose to donate their money, and to which causes?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. Yeah, I wonder how much social media is impacting where people are giving. I think that, one thing that we've really seen the rise of since social media is the rise of crowdfunding for social causes. So if we think back to the 2020 bushfires, Celeste Barber's, campaign to raise money in the wake of the bushfires was extremely popular. I think they raised $50 million.
Wow.
And so I don't think that kind of funding would happen without social media. Sadly, in that case, that funding was actually restricted to a particular charity and meant that a lot of intended good from those donations didn't actually end up happening because it was restricted to one designation, and she had said that, actually it'll go to a broader set of things, and it couldn't be. So I think there are some risks with that type of kind of like crowdfunding approach based on the limitations of the ways that charities work, which is a very interesting example.
It is a good example. The other example that comes to mind is 𝗠cie 2012. I think you remember that? Hey.
That feels like really early social media campaign.
Maybe before your time, but I remember 𝗠cie 2012 very vividly, and it really stands out in my mind as an informative and educational example of good intention, poorly informed, going poorly. And it turns out that maybe raising money to invade Uganda to hunt down Joseph Kony, might not be the best, most effective, cost-effective, impactful intervention, as it turns out. But the intentions were good.
Right. And I think that this is kind of, the risks to some extent of, being led by your empathy, being led by what you see on social media when it comes in terms of donating, is something that, gets recommended to you by someone that you look up to or trust, makes you much more likely to do it. But, the gap sometimes between, what you think you're giving to and what actually happens can be quite different. And I think that there are many exceptional charities out there doing exceptional work, but it can be really hard to tell the difference between an exceptional charity and a charity that is not doing a lot of good, or in some cases, funding child soldiers and other things we really don't want to have happen. I feel like this story really separates, everyone Gen Z and younger will not know what's going on here. So if anyone's 20 years old and watching this, they will not know what we're talking about. But yeah, I think that there are some real risks. But on the other hand, I think that, social media has inspired so many people to do good things. If we think about School Strike for Climate, that is a movement that really originated from young people on social media. And so, I think social media has the capacity to channel people's desire to want to do good things, to want to improve the world, to make change in the face of these kind of global challenges, and inspire people to do good. But I think we just need to match that with evidence and making sure that where the money is going or where our actions are going to things that will actually do good. So these things do bear a bit of investigation. We should investigate what's happening behind these actions that we're taking.
I think it's worth mentioning as well that, stuff that you see on social media is biased towards stuff that's sort of exciting, interesting, sexy in a way, and also maybe that has a bit of funding behind it. So the thing about malaria or cholera, diarrheal disease. This is not stuff that's like that exciting to, like see, it's not real clickbaity stuff that you're going to get excited about on TikTok.
And nor
so it's
do you
hard to
want
make
to
it
see
viral. Yeah, not necessarily. You want to see diarrheal, but it kills 1.2 million people a year or something, and it's not that hard to treat. Like it's really, you can have cost-effective interventions for this stuff. So I think it's just worth us all being cognizant that when we see stuff on social media, like it's potentially we're missing, there's blind spots that we're missing. The stuff that's maybe sounds a bit boring or bland can actually be the stuff that's really, really cost effective. The other thing that's worth mentioning is that malaria patients, people that suffer from neglected tropical diseases in really under-resourced parts of the world, they don't have lobby groups. Yeah. They're not paying for PR. They can't put ads or like have a social media team to make good content for them. So definitely on TikTok, there's going to be a lack of exposure to really the worst problems in the world.
Yeah, I also think about this kind of like asymmetry, not just with social media, but with media in general, right? Like we see a lot of donations come into causes that are, related to big natural disasters or to wars or, other major kind of events that happen. And those are the things that, capture attention in the media. But that's not paying attention to all of these people that, might be affected by these very like unsexy, unnewsworthy stories. It's, sadly not on the news that 500,000 people die of malaria every year. No. Or 1.2 million, children are dying, not children, but people are dying from diarrheal diseases. This stuff never makes the headlines. Yeah. And yet, preventing those deaths is actually, in many cases, far easier, far cheaper than responding to some of these natural disasters. And it's not to say that those natural disasters aren't worth responding to, but if
we want to respond to those, like surely we'd be 10 times as excited about responding to these other ones.
Yeah, I think it's just such a kind of mistake, or like it's like a natural bias that we have towards things that are like in the media and exciting. And this is kind of a cognitive bias that we have that means that we're underweighting the things that we don't see, the things we don't hear about. And I think, to me, this is, devastating, really, that people are dying for the want of, a preventative medication that would cost a few dollars because they never hear about it.
I think you see this play out as well in like when it comes to like philanthropic funders or government funders or like the thing that's unsexy is just really difficult to get funding for. And, I was talking about how like the most important thing is to change people's beliefs. I met this organization who focuses just on this stuff, and they're saying, the only thing that we try to do to shift a system is build the trust and the relationships between the right people, between the cross-sectoral relationships. But then try explaining how that is going to have an impact to your, a foundation or the government. And I think that, there's also the other part that is extremely difficult to measure. So there's like other barriers. Yes. But for the reason of it's not sexy, it's just not getting anywhere near how impactful it could be if it was properly funded.
Yeah, I think that's right. And we just see this with kind of like the perception of charity overheads at all, right? Everyone wants to fund the program. No one wants to fund the staff in the office that make that program happen. And I think that's a real mistake as well, because, not-for-profits, all of these social impact organizations, are able to do their jobs because there are people working on making those organizations efficient, making those organizations better, helping them design great programs. But no one can do that unless there's funding.
I think this one's a great example of how what really needs to change is it's the beliefs, right? Because the pay what it takes how we should be funding not-for-profits to maximize impact. It's very strong consensus around how we should do it, but there's still vast, a huge amount of foundations who are just not following it. And so, when they can very easily access that information, but they're still not doing it, like that's not a technical challenge. Like this is now an adaptive people challenge. And, you know, I'm really excited about like, how could AI or tech figure this part out? Yeah, and hopefully it does, because I think that we'll see huge gains.
Yeah, I agree.
Noel, why did you start Anika Legal? What was the motivation behind it?
So initial career plan was I read the 80,000 Hours Guide and had a whole plan. This was pre, 80,000 hours going hard on AI. So I had a bit of a plan, and then came home after a long traveling period, was about to do the thing which at the time looked like getting some experience in the private sector. Anika happened somewhat by accident, where me and a few friends went to this thing called the Global Legal Hackathon. We came up with the idea for Anika, a legal service that matched the huge amounts of unmet legal need with law students who wanted to assist. Of course, everything signed off by a qualified lawyer. We came with that idea, pitched it. We ended up doing it very well, and we ended up going to the global final and placing runners-up in this gala in New York. And so at that point, we had this idea with a lot of positive momentum, with the idea that if we built this, we could get all of these resources that weren't even in the sector in the first place. And so in that sense, not competing against what else would it do. And at that point, I started thinking, maybe this is the sort of, this is achieving what I wanted to achieve with my career, just in a very different way, and perhaps a more effective way. Because when I was reading those things, I didn't think about the opportunity of having all of this support for this social idea. And so that's where it started. I have always, for a very long time, have known that I'm going to have the most fun working on a social cause. But the fact that it was Anika in this way happened, somewhat by accident. And that was over 8 years ago. So it's been a while since then.
And a last question for everybody. How have the principles of effective altruism impacted the work that you do in your lives?
So I've talked a lot about things like systems change and, changing the laws rather than continuing to provide support for laws that don't really give people the rights that they have or should have, don't maintain people's dignity through that process. And I think about these things because I have that, EA played a huge role in a very formative period for me. And it's kind of just always thinking, all right, but like, what is a better way to do this? And, where you might start with services and go down to let's change the laws, change the structures, and then let's change the actual mental models and like what people believe. That's always because of, effective altruism, but perhaps just something that has always been in me of being kind of very passionate about optimization. That's how it's, I think that's how it's really influenced me. And probably one of the outcomes that I've realized is that by having that way of thinking and working on what I am working on, most of the time, like what I'm doing is planting seeds for a tree that I'm never going to see, because all this stuff is so long term, and changing people's beliefs and then that translating all the way down the line into like actual impact. If I'm really lucky, you'll get to see the sapling in my lifetime. But just I think EA probably helped me make peace with the fact that EA, among many other really brilliant resources about social impact, helped me make peace with the fact that it's like doing the work that you believe is the most important. That's kind of what life or what career is about. It's about that. It's about knowing that in the moment and like finding joy in that journey, rather than just only being focused on an outcome, because then that's going to be limited by what you see in your lifetime and all of these things.
I suppose for me, it's hard to separate the influence of effective altruism from studying medicine, because a lot of the ideas are the same. In medicine we have this concept of triage, where the sickest patient gets seen first, and you sort of give most of your resources to them, In effective altruism, it's exactly the same, right? We sort of order the issues in the world by priority and about which are things we can actually do something about. And we sort of say, well, probably the one that's affecting the most people that we can handle most effectively is the thing we should be focusing on the most. And we also have this idea of we have this idea of evidence-based medicine, which is you don't just do what's you vibe to be right. We don't do leeches or bloodletting anymore to get the demons out, you know, because that's what seemed to work last time. Like, we trial things out and we do it objectively, and we blind the trials, and we use control groups, and we make sure that the effect we're seeing is real. And that's exactly what we do in effective altruism as well, is you run trials and you see what actually works, because what we think works often doesn't. So for me, these ideas, I sort of got into both at the same time, and for me it's quite hard to separate the influence of both. Effective altruism has clearly, compared to other doctors, maybe made me think more globally, and it's made me think about applying the ideas that are intrinsic to medicine in a more global context, not just in my local environment, in my community or in my country, but just, you know, thinking more broadly. I mean, we're living in 2026, it's a global world. There's no real reason, I don't think, anymore to just want to work with the people on your street or in your city or in your country. Like, there's people all around the world that we can help with these same ideas.
What about yourself, Grace?
Well, you know, I think effective altruism's impact on me is somewhat clear as the CEO of Effective Altruism Australia. It would be pretty weird if I answered this question. I said, actually, it's had no impact. But I think maybe an interesting story is kind of how I came to effective altruism. So, you know, I think I've always wanted to do good. That was certainly my intention when I started as a management consultant. I thought, well, I'll be here for a few years, and then I'll go and apply that to doing good. And while I was in consulting, we did a little bit of pro bono work for a charity in the homelessness space that I really respect here in Melbourne. But the work that we were doing for them pro bono, to be honest, I think was a waste of their time. And it was around that time that I also, you know, went to a talk by Peter Singer and by Giving What We Can, where I learnt about the ideas of effective altruism. And it made me reflect on the pro bono work that I had been doing that, you know, this charity didn't really ask for, that I think was not a great use of their time, and probably distracted them from the great programs that they do run. And I thought, wow, like, my intention to do good is clearly not correlated with impact. Like, it really would have made more sense for me to just give the charity money and say, you know how to run your programs way better than I do, as a consultant with no background in providing homelessness services. And so that really made me reflect and think about what can I contribute and how do I actually have the most good? So off the back of that, I started donating a lot more. I eventually took the 10% pledge with Giving What We Can, because I learned that, you know, some charities can do, you know, 100 times more good than others. And knowing the difference between these things is really hard. And so relying on evidence and reason to help us guide our intuitions, or not guide our intuitions, guide our actions over our intuitions, became really, really important. And I've now worked in the sector for a number of years, which I'm really proud of. Maybe one other thing that I just want to say about effective altruism is, you know, the evidence-based work, I think, is really, really important. But beyond that, I do think that effective altruism is moving towards using evidence and reason and applying it to these more systemic issues as well, which I think is really important, because there are so many issues in the world that we can't do an RCT on, that we can't do a trial on, but they're really, really important, and we need to be able to make progress on them. So I'm really encouraged to see effective altruism moving towards thinking about how do we find and work on problems where we can't do these randomized controlled trials, but we can look for other evidence and other indicators to determine whether these things are effective uses of our resources. And that's something that I really want to see developing. The history of effective altruism as a movement really started with, how can we be sure about how we do a lot of good, which I think is an enormous improvement over a lot of things that we see in the sector. But we do need to acknowledge that the world is bigger than things that we can run an RCT on. And that, I think, is an important direction for effective altruism.
Yeah.
Really love that.
Yes. No, it's a common criticism I hear, actually, of effective altruism, and it's, I think, totally valid, that basically the biggest determinant of health is the level of economic development of the place that you were born in or raised in. So if we really want to improve outcomes for people, just simply, economic growth is what we need, which is true. If there was an easy lever to pull that we could get economic growth, we should definitely do that. But yeah, totally agree that is 100% the best solutions, as long as we can find ways to do that. And a lot of the ways are hard to figure out with RCTs. It's hard to run an RCT on economic growth, but I am excited that GiveWell and stuff is running the sorts of trials more broadly to try and do that stuff.
I have one more question, sorry, before we wrap. Do you think that AI can make us better humans? Or will make us better humans, I guess?
Yeah, it's kind of has to be will, because of course it can. But
the optimist in me wants to say yes, that if we're able to give people access to, I think in a perfect world of how AI moves along, if AI is able to help generate economic growth and to increase people's living standards around the world, and I think it does have the capacity to help us do this if the technologies are used in the right way, I think the more that people have more time, more space to consider what it means to live a good life and aren't necessarily burdened by having to do, 15 hours of work a day, that people, tend towards, thinking about how to help others when they have the time and capacity and resources to do so. So I think, if AI goes well for us all and does kind of lift everyone up, it will also lift everyone's internal kind of sense of morality and desire to help others. Or that's at least, if things go well.
Yeah. I think so. To build on that, I think this question of will it? I guess I don't really have an answer for will it, but the biggest fear that I have about AI making things worse is that it will just widen the wealth gap and things like that. But I think maybe I just hope that AI gives us a different way of thinking about excess. I think I think technology maybe did this, where you had these gigantic tech companies that now had, that just had wildly way more money than they ever thought they could. And then you have companies voluntarily signing up to super profits tax kind of things, or to super profit pledge to donation sort of things, where it's that's someone saying at a point okay, this is all we need. And my sort of belief is that we actually to get what we want out of life, it's way lower, that level. So you see some positive things people voluntarily signing up to that, saying, if I make this absurd amount of money, and I think that could really change things, because then that's directly tackling wealth inequality and reducing the concentration of wealth. That said, I don't know whether we've seen that actually happen. With advances in technology, has wealth been more distributed by the super wealthy giving it away or using it for other things? I haven't seen huge evidence to that. I guess it hasn't been that long either. So I hope it will make us better, and I think that's one way that it could really shift things, by making us think about excess completely differently.
Yeah, I suppose I'd just add that if I had lost a child to a preventable disease, malaria or cholera or something, I would be a worse person. I'd be pissed. and I'd be unhappy, and I wouldn't have space in my life to think about other people as much. I mean, having a pretty lush life, I think it's fair to describe my upbringing as, has given me the space to think about those existential questions, the top of Maslow's hierarchy or whatever, what is purpose? What does it mean to be good? I think I would hope that the more technology progresses the world and gives people more opportunity and makes people's lives better, the more space we'll have to sort of think more about our space in the world and what does it mean to be good. It is a bit of a luxury, being able to think, oh, what does it mean to be good? Should I be good? What should I be doing? And I don't think we can hold people who really struggle too much to, we can hold it against them too much that they, maybe are struggling to survive instead of pondering the RCT evidence for malaria interventions.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, everyone. It's been a fantastic conversation and really appreciate your time.
Yeah, pleasure. Thanks, that was great.
Thank you so much.
Are you interested in using reason and evidence to do more good? Do you think at the intersection of philosophy and taking action in the world? Join hundreds of people interested in effective altruism for a weekend of learning, discussion and taking action at our 10th annual EAGX Australasia Conference in Melbourne from the 27th to the 29th of November. You can learn more and apply now at eaa.org.au/EAGX.